USCHO.com. This is the USCHO Weekend Review podcast from U.S. College Hockey Online at USCHO.com. A look at this weekend in college hockey and a review of the top news of the week.
Welcome to USCHO Weekend Review for Monday, January 31st, 2022. I'm Ed Trefzger alongside Jim Connelly and Derek Schooley. This podcast is brought to you by DCU Digital Federal Credit Union. What will DCU mean to you? Find out today by visiting dcu.org. Membership required. Well, we've been talking quite a bit along the way about how important the games this past weekend were for Arizona State. And even, Jim, when we talked to Mike Hastings last week on the Spotlight podcast, he admitted that he had found out how important those games were to Arizona State by listening to our discussions about them. But Minnesota State pretty much wiped out the hopes of Arizona State for an NCAA bid. But what else was proven in that pair of games over the weekend?
I think it shows a little bit more of a human aspect to Minnesota State. You know, we're used to them giving up 7 to 10 shots on goal a game and shutouts, and Arizona State goes and gets some goals and gets some shots and makes some competitive games right off the bat. And I think that shows a little bit more of the human side of Minnesota State. I think I watched the first game, minus the first minute and missed a goal. But I think that for the most part, it was pretty back and forth. And I think the chronic issue that Arizona State's had all year ended up biting them in the end, was goaltending. And I think while Minnesota State actually deserved what they got, you can't say they didn't deserve. But I think if Arizona State's goaltending might have been a tad better, I think the second power play goal, while it was cross box and cross crease, I think that's a stoppable goal. And the third one, a really neat one-handed goal that Minnesota State scored, but kind of shocked the goaltender and made him surprised. And it's tough when you play a Minnesota State team to come back from holes. And Arizona State did. They made the games competitive to where the goalies were pulled. But I think it shows a little bit more about Minnesota State than it does Arizona State. We've been on and off the Arizona State bandwagon. Are they going to get in? Are they aren't? Are they going to get in? I think now, once again, their bubble is burst again. And but I think it showed a little bit of a human side to Dryden McKay and Minnesota State.
Yeah, certainly. But, you know, I'm going to walk away from this weekend knowing just how good a team Minnesota State is. Yes, they did. You know, it didn't look like the typical CCHA game where they're, you know, limiting the opponent to 10 shots or 12 shots or whatever it might be. And it weren't shutouts. But, you know, Minnesota State has now finished their non-conference play. They're 9-1 in non-conference games. Their only non-conference loss was to Michigan in the Icebreaker Championship game. That's a pretty impressive run. And what they've done inside their conference, obviously they're dominating the CCHA, but I look at how well they have done in terms of just non-conference play. This team is as good as any in the country. I think that a weekend like this late in the season, because, you know, everything else came so early in the year, but having this weekend late in the season is great for the Mavericks, because you can call upon this really recent, how hard it can be. This was almost like an NCAA tournament weekend for them, where they knew they couldn't take a minute off. They had a hungry team on the other side. And I think that they proved that they can come out of these tough games with big wins. And this, it just, you know, puts more faith for me in Minnesota State. Not that it's waned a lot all year, but it certainly gives me more faith in them that this is a really good team that I wouldn't be surprised if they're sitting back in the Frozen Four yet again. And
you know what, and I'm not taking anything away. I think I just, you know, giving up the goals. You don't see them give up goals. And they gave up 5 on a weekend. And for some teams, they'd be like, yay, we gave up 5. For them, it's like, oh my God, we gave up 5. But this is a start of a very challenging aspect of Minnesota State's schedule. They've got 6 games left. They've got at Bowling Green, home against Bemidji, and at Michigan Tech. And Michigan Tech is on fire right now. And that becomes 6 very hard games. Throw Arizona State on top of that. That's a tough, that's a battle-tested team that's going to be in the NCAA tournament by the time they get done. And then they lose Coach Hastings is gone. The team will have to respond under Todd Knott, and they're going to lose Smith as well. So I mean, they're losing some players and their coach down the stretch here.
If you were an opposing coach taking them on over the next 3 weekends, are there some things that you can take away from Arizona State's performance that you might put into your game plan?
Oh, I don't know. I think you're going to have to get it. I think you're going to have to take a page out of the Penn State book a little bit and watching them. I think you just got to throw as much to the net and have people around the net as possible. You cross that blue line because they're so good in the neutral zone. They've been so good away from the puck. Hope that they fall asleep, put some rebounds on the pads, and just get things to the net. I mean, if you look at the goal that Josh Doan scored on Saturday night with 6-on-5, yes, it was 6-on-5, but there was a rebound and they had a lot of bodies around the net. I just think that you just got to just try to get as much traffic and bodies then as you can with that team.
Yeah,
I don't know, Jimmy. What do you got?
Yeah, I think that was exactly where I would go with this. It's generating rebounds, because you're not going to beat Dryden McKay on a wrist shot from the slot, even if you have a little bit of traffic. He sees pucks really well. But if you can keep pucks low and have bodies crashing the net, you give yourself a better shot. I mean, listen, that's not a secret in the game of hockey. Any coach would tell you that it's much better just to be hard nosed, getting to the dirty areas and getting those goals that don't look pretty, don't make a highlight reel. But you look at, I've seen a little bit of tape on these guys this year, probably 3 or 4 games that I've been able to watch. It's been rare that you've seen tons of rebounds. And I think that's as much Dryden McKay. He's a great goaltender, and he directs the puck really well. But it's also teams not getting to the net. Teams have to get to the net more on this Minnesota Duluth club.
I'm going to throw a trivia question out to you, Ed. What does the Icebreaker, Bowling Green, Northern Michigan, and Arizona State have in common?
That's a tough one. I give.
That's been the weekends that they've given up the most goals. And that's 5.
Wow.
5. 4 times. Everything else below 5. Haven't hit 6 all year. 5.
Wow.
They've all that. And the Icebreaker, you're looking at Michigan and Providence. So in those 2 games, 5 is the magic number of the most goals they've given up in a weekend.
And the Northern loss, of course, is the first only loss since really back to Thanksgiving on their schedule. So, and that was a 4-2. That was 4 goals in 1 game. So,
and Dryden McKay
didn't play that game. Yes.
Well, we've mentioned Dryden McKay a few times. So, fortunately, you guys have mentioned him first.
Here come the trolls again. No, they're going to get me.
But as one thing to note, the third goaltender in NCAA history to earn 100 career wins on Saturday. That's pretty impressive.
Yeah, he has done everything. And I was just on another podcast before I jumped on here. And one thing we were talking about is the fact that he will it's a good chance he will get through his entire career, have almost every record in the NCAA record books, be very close if he doesn't have every record, and he'll have never won the Mike Richter Award. There's a really good chance that's going to happen.
Well, does that say something about him, or does that say something about the award? Maybe I don't want to go there, but how do you pick one? Like this year, how are you going to pick one goaltender? There are probably a half a dozen you could make the case for.
Yeah, my biggest problem, I think, with the Richter Award, guys, is that there is a bias that, we always used to hear when I first got into this business, almost 30 years ago. You'd hear all the time, oh, the Hobie has a Western bias, or the Hobie has an Eastern bias. Well, with the Mike Richter Award, there's certainly a bias against goaltenders that don't play at Power 5 conference schools or big schools or teams that are always in the NCAA tournament. We've heard it before. Great goaltender, but is his competition good? And I bet we're going to hear it about another guy this year, Yanni Peretz at Quinnipiac, because you're going to hear, he's really good, but look at how many shots he faces a game. Well, I get it that there's a product of a team there as well, but I don't care. You win the number of games and you put up the lifetime goals against average or career goals against average that Dryden McKay has put forward. He's accomplished a lot, but he won't get, by the end, I don't think he's going to be very recognized for all of it.
Well, we were going to mention another goaltender in a moment, as Derek mentioned, but let's turn to the next thing on the list here. Quinnipiac won the Connecticut Ice tournament. What did we find out from that? I'm going to throw this one out at you right away, is that it took overtime in the first round for them to beat Sacred Heart, and then the 2-0 win over UConn to win the tournament. Does that close game in the first round show something?
I think really what it shows is Quinnipiac found a way to do what they're supposed to do. I mean, you're looking at 25th, 37th, and 55th teams in the pairwise, and they're in the top, depending on the day, they're 6, 7, 5, and they found a way to win a tournament that they were supposed to win. I think it would have been a bigger story if they wouldn't have won compared to a bigger story of them winning, because actually losing or winning in overtime against Sacred Heart hurts them. So this weekend did hurt them comparatively, but they do get to raise the trophy. And hats off to CJ Maritola and Sacred Heart for putting this tournament on in a massive blizzard in the East Coast and being able to do that. And I know it was a challenge, and they didn't have the attendance they would have probably liked the first night, but from the highlights that I saw, there looked to be a good crowd in the stands on Sunday. So hats off to them for getting the second annual Connecticut Ice tournament down. But it really, to me, was it would have been a bigger story if Quinnipiac wouldn't have won it.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, the takeaway I have from this is that Quinnipiac could chase a game and do it successfully. They had to score a goal very late on Saturday in the semifinal just to get to overtime. And to do that, sometimes that's the swagger and that's the confidence. They haven't had to do it much this year. They haven't trailed in many games. And here they trail, a plucky Sacred Heart team. We know that they're a good team. They might not show it in the pairwise, but they're a good team. And I know that they take a lot of pride in this tournament. So they probably had a little bit more hunger, but yet still Quinnipiac can fall behind and still find a way to come out with a W. That's pretty good. I'd take that any day. And Rand Pecknold has to be happy with where his team's going to walk away from this one with a trophy, even though, as Derek pointed out, it did in the pairwise hurt them.
Yeah, and it was funny. We were talking last week with Jeff Jackson, and as the season has gone on, as we've had these weekend review podcasts, we've gotten the feeling that moving to a bigger proportion of the points in an overtime win is something that had a lot of momentum behind it. But then there is the view that Jeff mentioned. He said if it were up to him, he'd make it 51-49. And I'm wondering if there's going to be some pushback from moving that to a full win or even a 2/3, 1/3 when the coaches get together in Naples.
I'll be in that room. But I've heard more displeasure with the 3-on-3 overtime this year than I've ever heard before. I heard I was part of the votes in our league to go. I was part of the national vote, and I played it for 2 years and enjoyed it. It was exciting, but this year, for some strange reason, there's a lot more bringing the puck back. I watched Sacred Heart play Mercyhurst. There's a lot more calculated. I think as people play it and they watch it, and before it was just, you just played and you just went coast to coast and you tried to score, and you would take bad shots. You'd miss the net. They'd come back 2-on-1. They wouldn't score, come back 3-on-1. They went back and forth. Now it's more, we're not going to shoot from a bad angle. We're going to bring the puck back. And there's been more and more displeasure over it. And I wouldn't be surprised to see some conversation about 3-on-3 being changed and back to a 5-on-5, 4-on-4, and more of, like you said, a tie. But you still have to break those ties, I think, for league purposes. But then you go, I don't want to lose a championship or lose home ice on a shootout. Well, I got a real good idea. Don't go to the shootout. Win there before.
Yeah. The funny thing about it also is the way the math works with a 0.8 on at home and a 1.2 on the road. The team on the road who loses that overtime ends up with better numbers out of it than the home team that wins when you crank through the 0.8 times the 0.55. So, it's for all intents and purposes a tie for pairwise reasons.
And you know what? I went to Western Michigan. I mean, seriously.
You said there would be no math today. I thought there was no math today.
You work at RIT. You're throwing out 0.55, 88. Holy cow! Oh, Tim Denny, help me, please.
You know what? It's funny when that all came together and those numbers were put together and we were adjusting our pairwise scripts and calculations. We sat there and worked through that and said, that doesn't make any sense. Why would they do that? I mean, it took us about a week to finally say, okay, I guess that's what they're doing. But yeah, that's where it went. But back to Quinnipiac, we were talking about goaltenders. Freshman Yaniv Peretz, his 9th shutout in the title game. That was 2-0 over UConn. So he's got 9, as does Devin Levi, although he's going to be at the Olympics with Canada. In fact, he's there now. They're 1 ahead of Dryden McKay with 8. How about these goaltenders? Again, we mentioned the Richter Award. Is it going to be a hard thing for a goaltender from Minnesota State or from Quinnipiac to get the attention and be the winner of that?
Oh, you're making difficult questions. Say, I'll just say this. I'm going to throw out this: how you get Dylan St. Cyr to transfer as a grad transfer to come over to Quinnipiac. You think you got your goaltending problem solved, and then you get a freshman to come in and do this. Tough problems that Rand has right now in Hamden, Connecticut, with 2 big time goalies. But I'll leave the Richter Award stuff to Jimmy. He's on that. But Dylan St. Cyr comes in and it's supposed to be the starter, and he hasn't done anything other than throw a 1.33 goals against average and a 9.29 save percentage. And it's not good enough compared to a 0.79 and a 9.55. Come on, really?
Yeah, and it was the same thing when we were talking with Jeff Jackson at Notre Dame last week. He got Matthew Galida in as a transfer from Cornell. And then Ryan Bischel is putting up almost the same kind of numbers. He's in a similar situation where he's got a 1-2 punch in goaltending.
It's a luxury. I mean, as you know, Derek says, I don't feel bad for Rand. What a luxury it is. But I just, it's how do you think about it? The fact that if Dylan St. Cyr doesn't get injured, doesn't get dinged up in training camp this year, we may never have seen Yanni Peretz yet. Dylan St. Cyr might have just taken this team, carried the water, and have the same numbers he has, and he'd be fantastic. But we got to see Peretz right off the bat because of St. Cyr's injury. And now he hasn't taken the reins, but he's still playing a ton of minutes, and he's, has the possibility to put up the greatest goaltending numbers college hockey has ever seen.
Well, let's go to our final topic for the first segment here. The poll is just getting finalized for today as we are recording, but today's DCU USCHO.com men's Division I ice hockey poll is going to have Minnesota State at number 1, Quinnipiac at number 2, even if the pairwise doesn't put them in those locations. Who are the next 3 you have in there, and why do you put them there?
Certainly Denver, Michigan, and after that, probably Western Michigan. I'm not sure. Week to week, I kind of maybe bend on that last team. But, if I'm talking about the 4 teams that I hope get number 1 seeds in the tournament because of what they've accomplished, it's certainly Minnesota State, Michigan, Quinnipiac, Denver, in no particular order.
I'm going to go Michigan, Denver, and I'm going to throw in honor of Ed, I'm going to be a homer and throw my alma mater in there. And because I know Ed's got a game to work tomorrow, so he's in that mode. He's got to Friday, Sunday, Tuesday week. So I'm going to throw in Western Michigan. I just think that what they've accomplished this year and who they beat has been outstanding. So that's where I'm going. But I'm also going to say, don't forget about Michigan Tech. I said it earlier.
Yes. So that was the team that I was having the hard time of maybe, falling off of. I think that they're a really good team, and I think that they probably get more of a chip on their shoulder than anybody out there. There's no team in the country
6-1-1.
Yeah, there's no team in the country that probably has more of a chip on the shoulder than Michigan Tech.
Let's go 6-1-1 in their last 8. The tie was in Great Lakes, where they ended up not doing anything over it. It just tied. I don't believe they went to a shootout that game. I'm not 100% sure. And then they lost 3.
No, you're right. I'm pretty sure you're right.
Then they lost 3-2 against Michigan State in overtime. So they've really lost 1.05. If you lose 50 in your tie and you lose 55 in the 3-on-3 overtime. I mean, wow, that's in 8 games, and those are against tough teams. I mean, they've had Michigan State, Lake Superior, who's pretty hot right now, shut Lake Superior out twice, back to back, and then back to back 5-2 wins over Bemidji. So I mean, look at that. Then you got Northern coming up Tuesday. Then you got St. Thomas. Then you got Northern again. This could be a little bit of a run here. They said don't count out Joe Sean right now.
No, we talked to him right at the beginning of the season, too, and it sounded like he had a pretty special team there and was really high on them. My ballot, I had Minnesota State, Quinnipiac, Denver, Michigan, Western Michigan, and right behind Western Michigan, Minnesota, Duluth. It's kind of hard to separate them after that past weekend, but maybe Michigan Tech, maybe they're the Cincinnati Bengals of college hockey this year, the team that everybody was overlooking that's going to make an impact. Well, we're going to take a break and we'll come back with more of this edition of USCHO Weekend Review. It's sponsored by Digital Federal Credit Union. Visit dcu.org.
This is the USCHO Weekend Review podcast from US College Hockey Online.
Sometimes it's not about wanting a new car, it's about needing one. And I needed one I could rely on. So I got an auto loan with DCU. They offer the same low rates on both new and used cars, and I was able to borrow a little extra to make a used car as good as new. My auto loan from DCU means a ride I can finally rely on, which feels like a pretty big thing. What will DCU mean to you? Insured by NCUA. Membership required. Visit dcu.org.
Continuing now with the Weekend Review podcast for January 31st, 2022. Let's go out east. Can Boston University rally to make the NCAA tournament without winning Hockey East's tournament? They've been really low. They were well below 500, down to 41 in the pairwise. Now they're at 22, but they are 9-1-1 in their last 11. They've had wins over UMass and Providence. They also swept Arizona State in there, which probably damaged the chances for Arizona State as much as, or close to as much as having gotten swept by Minnesota State. They've got 3 games left versus Maine. They've got the Bean Pot, and they've got a series with Boston College. Jim, this is probably your area of expertise, being around that league. Can they do that? Can they get up there?
I just want to throw one word and I'll let Jim go. No.
All right, Jim.
Jim, take us through. You're Hockey East guy. My word is no.
It's going to be tough. It's just that they don't have the teams remaining on their schedule that are going to boost their pairwise a lot. But listen, they've gotten healthy at the right time and they're playing well. And, they're going to be missing Drew Comesso now for a month. That's a big loss. When your starting goaltender, who has been playing very well of late, suddenly is gone, and he'll be over with the U.S. Olympic team. They left yesterday. So I look at that as maybe another reason that makes it a little bit more challenging, but they're healthy in their first line. is finally all out there on the ice playing together. And, I look at Matt Brown, Jay O'Brien, they're both scoring goals. You have those guys going. This is a good team, but I don't know that they have the remaining schedule to dig out of the hole that they dug themselves early.
Who's the goalie now?
Vinny Duplessis, he just hasn't had a ton of time in net this season, but when he's been in there, his numbers are somewhat similar to Comesso's. Now, Comesso's numbers of late are better. So will that be their downfall? It's possible. They're going to play some teams in here, between the Bean Pot and the 3 games with Maine. Maine's playing some of their best hockey of the year right now. It's a tough road for BU. If they go 7-0 here and, maybe get through 2 rounds of the Hockey East tournament, do they maybe with, 9-1 down the stretch, does that get them in? It might. They would be one of the teams that would be most helped if the old last 16 criteria was still in there, but that's been long gone. So it's a tough road for BU, but I like the way they're playing right now.
And speaking of the pairwise, there's still a lot of volatility in that. We were talking a week or two ago whether AIC could make the tournament as an at-large, and one of the things I brought up is if they have a loss to a team in their league, it's going to hurt them. A crazy game yesterday. Holy Cross went out 4-1 by the end of the first period, opened that up to 5-1. Eric Lang pulled his netminder with 8.5 minutes left in the game, came back as close as 5-4, but that loss for AIC dropped them from 16 to 22 in the pairwise. And that's similar to what would happen in the tournament. Now, maybe they can make up some ground if they can string together some more wins through the last bit of the season. But I think that's an issue right there that the pairwise can be very volatile. One loss can drop a team 3, 4, 5 or more positions, depending on who it is they play.
They were legitimately in at 16. They were 16 after their first game, and I didn't realize that they started so early yesterday. Next thing I know, I look up and they're down 5-1, and it's like not even 12:45. I'm like, what the heck? And tough one. That's, like you said, the volatility there, and that's where the volatility is going to come. And I know we're going to talk a little bit about the Bean Pot, and I got a point to make as far as that goes when we get to it.
The one thing there, you mentioned the volatility, Ed. It's a lot of negative volatility. You don't see teams with the opportunity to play certain games to move up that fast in the pairwise. You only see the ability to move down. So that you're right. There's a ton of volatility, and you're not going to see a team climb 10 or 12 spots between now and the end of the season. That ship has sailed. So I'd take a line somewhere around, I don't know, 20, 22 in the pairwise, and say that if you're not inside of that right now, you need to win your conference championship. I know that somebody's probably already done the math on this and they're way ahead of me, but that's kind of mentally where I've drawn the line.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Well, we did have a couple of reader questions that we wanted to get to. The first one is, given that COVID is causing teams to drastically change schedules last minute, and teams are having to play games on days or hours after being cleared with enough athletes to play, should the NCAA consider expanding the tournament? Teams on the pairwise bubble will have lost games to teams they should not have when having to play while just getting into recovery, down in numbers on their roster, and missing full lines at times.
Same thing I just said. One word answer: no. Because then it becomes all the time. People are going to be injured all the time. Next year, somebody will be injured. I remember when Air Force was really, really good, and Eric Geen was their Hobie Baker finalist the year before. He broke his leg. I mean, you can't. That's right now. Unfortunately, it's part of our game. Yeah, everybody's dealing with it. Everybody's got issues. I don't think there's going to be made any adjustments, any changes to anything other than just saying no.
And outside of these COVID years, isn't it the situation? It seems like that with every team, there's a stretch where the flu or a stomach bug or something will run through the team, and you have a week and a half where you're kind of down a bit. Doesn't that happen regularly?
One of our bigger wins in the last couple of years, we were having 7 guys at a practice. And this is like literally 4 weeks before COVID. Looking back at it now, was it COVID? Who knows? But we had 7 guys on practice on a Tuesday, and 8, and then you got up to 15, and then you had guys joining that hadn't played, and then we had some big wins. Those are team bonding, rallying points behind it. And yes, it happens to everybody. Looking back, if we were in this landscape right now, there's no way we would have played those games. We would not have played hockey that weekend, but we didn't think anything of it. And right now they're thinking of it, but everybody goes through it, whether they lose their best player, whether they lose their fourth liner, whether they lose their best goalie. Does Mankato want a redo on that Northern game that they lost? I mean, it happens.
Yeah, I can't agree more, Derek. I mean, do I feel bad for teams that won't get their 34 complement, of games? Maybe, maybe sometimes, but you still have 32 games to prove yourself. And I don't. The only reason this question is even asked is because the pairwise exists and we get to see it in real time of how teams move. The reality is the pairwise only matters on the last day. So why change, anything because of a criteria that you really only have to look at on the last day of the season? And I think that the tournament, for one thing, does not need to expand. In no way. We can't go past 16. You only have 59 programs playing this year. You can't have 18 or 20 teams, and you might as well just have the college hockey NCAA basketball tournament where you put 64 or 68 in. We'll just have to get some D3 programs if we keep expanding it. But at the same time, criteria, nothing needs to change. It's a different year, but as Ed and you just pointed out, Derek, this is something that happens every year.
Well, let's take another question from readers or listeners, I guess, readers of the site and listeners of the podcast. The Bean Pot feels wide open this year, especially with several players and 2 number 1 goalies. We talked about Drew Comesso and Devin Levi at the Olympics. Any predictions for the Bean Pot this year? I think also with BC kind of having a down year, that's a big part of it too. Some predictions.
I've got a question, and this goes to our resident Hockey East guy. Have you ever had a Bean Pot where not one of the teams is in the NCAA tournament at the time of the Bean Pot?
Not in my memory.
Because right now you got a 16. No, you got a 16, a 22, a 28, and a 32. Yeah, I mean,
it's been a long time if it has, Derek. And I think that if I do plan on making the trek over to TD Garden next Monday and the following Monday for the games. But, if I didn't, I'd end a streak that goes back to 1989. I've seen every Bean Pot game in person since 89. And the reality is it's always got somebody really hyper competitive in the field, if not 2, if not 3. I mean, I think there was a couple of years ago where all 4 teams were nationally ranked when the Bean Pot came around. It is kind of strange. BC having a bit of a down year after losing so many players. Now they're going to be missing 3 for the Olympics. BU, Northeastern, both missing their goaltender. Harvard's missing 1 guy at the Olympics as well. It now almost becomes more about who just has the best mojo in the locker room. I mean, who can pull it together for 2 separate Monday nights on these games that seem to mean so much to these 4 teams. I think that, it's a great tournament. It's one of my favorite, annual events. I think it's the most often attempted to be replicated tournament, but you'll never replicate the Bean Pot because you can't, unless you play a tournament that's played on every other, on consecutive Mondays or consecutive Wednesdays or something like that, you'll never replicate the Bean Pot. And I know a lot of people have tried. So I think that sometimes just the locker room and the attitude of the players, whether they are nationally ranked or whether they are, down the bottom. I go back to the first Bean Pot Northeastern ever won in 1980. I think they only had, 4 wins coming into the season, going into that Bean Pot, and ended up earning their first Bean Pot, beating BC in overtime. So I think of this as just, it won't diminish the tournament at all. It'll still be a good tournament. I don't know how to handicap it though. I think it's almost impossible to handicap right now.
I think it might be the most competitive because of
possibly
where these teams are. We talk about, they're just not, they're not where we expect these teams to be. And I think this could make it more competitive, and it's wide open. I was thinking that, though, you would give the big announcement about what's going to go on in Boston in April. I mean, I'm waiting for that one. I mean, the big announcement.
We'll hold that one off for a few more weeks.
We're going to hold off that big announcement because that could be one of your bigger free agent signings in a long time.
Okay, we'll let you all know. Derek Schooley will be with us broadcasting in Boston at the Frozen Four. You happy now?
Yeah, I think that's going to hit transaction wires today. I'll tell you. Well, elite hockey prospects, watch out. Hey, let's go. I'm excited. I've never, of all the Frozen Fours, I've seen you guys at every one. I've been there. Never been to a Frozen Four in Boston.
It should be fun. It should be great. We got one last topic on the docket here today, and it's not a pleasant one. And it's actually two different stories. First, the departure of Rick Bennett from Union, and then the investigations and release of information coming from the University of Michigan. Let's start with Union. Rick Bennett, in his career, started out before becoming head coach at Union. He was an assistant coach as that program was being put together, won the 2014 Frozen Four with a terrific Dutchman team, had to go on administrative leave, and then last week stepped down. Kind of some shocking news and very, very sad news for people who've gotten to know him. And you've known him better than any of us, Derek. What are your thoughts? What's your take on this?
Really, really good person. Intense, but a good guy. I mean, we played Union in the Dartmouth tournament. We talked to them about coming to Three Rivers Classic numerous times. Really was obviously, you see him from the outside as I mean, he's big. He's a big man, and you could tell that he played in the NHL. His hands are massive, and I'll tell you, I wouldn't want to tangle with him like Seth Appert did. That's for sure. But a good person. I feel bad for Rick. I don't know the story. I don't want to really know the story. I just want to. I know Rick for what he is, a good coach, an intense coach. Got the best out of his players, and I hope the best for him in the future. I mean, he's going to land on his feet, and whether it's pro hockey, whether it's college hockey, and like I said, good man.
Yeah, kind of shocking news, though. This is a coach that took a program with no scholarships, a student body under 3,000, if not under 2,000. I mean, it's a tiny school Union, and brought them to a national championship. And that will still go down as one of the greatest accomplishments I've ever seen in this sport, and the success that he was able to have with this program. I'm just like you, Derek. I've made calls. I've asked questions. What happened? Not a lot in the release. Maybe, that the university issued said even less than we already knew. Saying that it was about his coaching style, which I don't understand totally. But a good guy too. I didn't know him probably as well as many. I just don't see that league much, and I covered him a couple of times, obviously at a Frozen Four out in Philly. And then, a couple of times he's made trips out to Boston to play some Hockey East teams. I'd see him, but great guy. Always liked his personality, always liked the way he approached the game, and, was never let the situation of the school he was in, no scholarship, small student body, handicap him. And I think that, I agree with what you said. He will end up somewhere. I don't know if it'll be in college or the pros, but he will end up somewhere. He's a good coach.
Well, the other story to turn to is a difficult one. It has many pieces. There's still not a lot that's known publicly, but at the University of Michigan, a couple of things broke last week. One was a news outlet which obtained an email from Mel Pearson using a Freedom of Information Act request. And that was an email about the GLI and suggesting maybe that was a pair of games that didn't make sense to play. And then news that university is investigating the team, and in part having to do with the allegation that players were asked to make untrue COVID-19 statements. This is pretty heavy stuff, and we really want to avoid too much speculation because this is what has been released, and there's still a lot more to be known. But how do you digest something like this?
Well, it's important to say everything's alleged because nothing has been proven, particularly on the COVID allegations. Heavy's the head that wears the crown, and when you're on the top, people will come after you. And you better make sure you're doing everything right. And I'm not going to say whether Mel and his staff did or did not do things right. We don't know the answers to this. But if you're near the top, you almost have to watch out for people coming after you because everybody, listen, this team just recruited 8 of the best players in college hockey over the last couple of years, and I get it. People will snipe at you, and I get it. And if you did something wrong, and if they did something wrong, I hate to say it, it's got to be punished. It's just a bad look, and it's a bad look at a bad time. This is a program that should be celebrating, how great some of their players are. The fact that these players, many of them will go and represent the U.S. and Canada over in the Olympics this year. They should be, it should be a great time for Michigan. Instead, you've got this, what is turning out to be, whether it's true or not, you've still gotten the black eye out of this. There's always a little bit of truth to every story, but where that reality of where the truth and fiction line is sometimes gets blurred. I'm not going to speculate. I know none of us here want to do that. It's a shame because it should be such a celebrated time for Michigan in terms of what they're doing in the hockey world, and instead it's being really tarnished by what is becoming bad press for the university.
And I'll just follow up with that. It'll be interesting to see how, with all the players leaving for the Olympics, and with this, how this team handles distractions moving forward, because this is, like you said, when you are at the top of the mountain, distractions do come into play. Whether it's people taking shots at you for not playing the game after just releasing a video saying next man up, whether it's whether it's people applying to find out about emails. I mean, I was shocked. I think I was more shocked that somebody took the time to look into it. Just a regular person through the Freedom of Information Act than anything. And hey, more power to them. And then I guess that's where they're at. So, it'll be interesting to see how they handle the distraction of this and losing the players to the Olympics and how they go moving forward.
Well, it's certainly a story we'll follow carefully. Anything like this, there are real people in real lives, and we want to be careful with that. And I think we'll wrap up right there for this edition of Weekend Review, which has been sponsored by DCU, Digital Federal Credit Union. What will DCU mean to you? Find out today by visiting dcu.org. Membership required. For Jim Connelly, for Derek Schooley, I'm Ed Trefzger, and we'll catch you next time.
This has been the USCHO Weekend Review Podcast, a production of U.S. College Hockey Online. Visit uscho.com/podcasts to listen or subscribe.